Dr. Thomas Seager is back on the podcast to discuss something that is not out there very much at all, green light, diving into the green light spectrum and how it is helping with migraines and so much more. So dive into this conversation. We talk a little bit of cold therapy and the importance of green light. Dr. Seager, thank you for jumping on here again as we dive into something that I'm absolutely fascinated with in light and your work around the green. You were on before talking about the Morosca Forge and the ice baths and did a really great job. You've even got me doing ice baths now in my little DIY type way. But brother, if you'll do that kind of quick introduction again to recap, and then we're going to take a look into the green light spectrum, almost like a 101, because there's just not a lot of information out there.
I'm so glad you're asking me about this because I used to be a entirely obscure engineering professor at Arizona State. Like you couldn't even Google me if you wanted to, you know? And then COVID happened and I was very vocal against the lockdowns. I lost a lot of friends. And because of that, you know, US News and World Report and the San Francisco Chronicle and Newsweek, they all found my Twitter feed and I became like Twitter famous for a second because they all did these articles on what a terrible human being I am, you know, for being against the lockdowns on campus. And I resolved then, like that taught me something is up. I resolved then I'm going to change my career. I'm doing ice baths, you know, I'm going to help people take charge of their health. I'm going to help them take care of their metabolism and their immune system. And so I started writing more articles. I finished this book. I got the blog going and Morosca Forge is on the Joe Rogan show all the time. And people are really talking about ice baths. Along the way, my girlfriend gets migraine headaches. And I was thinking about the interplay between light and UV and vitamin D and the metabolism. So all these things are kind of swirling around. And a paper showed up in my inbox about green light for headaches. I'm like, oh, maybe this could help my girlfriend, right? I called up a friend at Mito Red Light. This is Scott Chevery. He's in Scottsdale and he owns a red light company. And I said, hey, could you maybe make a red light, but put green LEDs in it instead of red, everything else the same. And he says, well, you know, I'll call a few people, see what he can come up with. And he did. I asked him for two different wavelengths, you know, like 525 and 540 nanometers, something around that range. He got a prototype from his manufacturer and he called me up and he said, Tom, this is garbage. It's way too bright. You know, you can never use this. And I'll show you a little bit, Logan, about what it looks like, but it's a prototype. Looks like one of those compact, you know, red light devices. And you shine it on your face like, oh my gosh, if I didn't have a headache, this is going to give me one, you know? And he says, I think I should just throw it out. It's not going to work. They didn't build it the way I really wanted them to. I said, well, hang on a second. Me and AJ were together. We'll be right out. You know, I want to take a look at this before we give up. I get into his office. And his lights in his office are really bad, you know, fluorescent and that kind of thing. And AJ's getting a little bit of a headache, partly maybe because of the lights or the stress, or I don't know. But she says she's at about a 6. And I pick up the green light and I'm like, oh my God, you're terrible. I mean, what were we even thinking? How could we possibly do something like this? And she says, let me see that. And she reaches over, she takes it out of my hand. She closes her eyes, Logan, and she puts it right up against her face. And she says, this feels really good. This takes me down to about a 2. And I thought, holy crap, we have just kind of accidentally invented together the world's most powerful green phototherapy device. It is so bright that it will work even through your shut eyelids. Logan, it turned out to be genius because green light is effective for migraine headaches as long as you block out all the other wavelengths. And so every device out there right now, and there's some really cheap ones, there's one good one that's a little more expensive, but they're very gentle. And so you have to go into a closet and you have to like turn on your green light and everything else is dark, and you sit in there for like 45 minutes. And it works wonders. There's a study at Harvard, there's a study at University of Arizona, like 80% reduction in the frequency of migraines and 60% reduction in this pain. Okay, really good. But nobody's got time to sit in a closet every day for 45 minutes. So what she figured out was you close your eyes, this will block all the other wavelengths. And now you need a bright green, not a soft green, so that you can just be in your bedroom or on your couch. Through the closed eyes, you get about 30% of the intensity coming out of the device. The eyelids attenuate the rest. And that is enough to block the pain of a migraine headache, of a post-concussion headache, of a traumatic brain injury headache, of a stress headache, or a sinus headache. There are so many different types of headaches for which green light feels like a miracle that people now, not a lot of people, because I'm still better known for ice baths, but people now are sending me notes and they're saying, this is amazing. This is like a miracle. I didn't think this could ever work. I had a 9 and I was like, my medication is barely touching it. And I did 10 minutes with your green light. I'm down to a 1.5. How is that even possible? And the weird thing, Logan, is nobody knows how it works. This originated at Harvard University. There's a headache scientist there, Rami Burstein, and he's one of the best known. Like if you go to the headache conference, Rami Burstein, he's doing the, keynote address. He's one of the most famous and well known. And he had all these migraineurs come into Harvard and he was testing different wavelengths of light. Hey, how does it feel if I give you blue? How does it feel if I give you yellow? How does it feel if I give you red? And every single one of them is like, it's terrible. I hate it. It's called photosensitivity. When you get a migraine, often just any kind of light is painful. But when he tested green at 530 nanometers, people said, oh, that feels pretty good. He publishes a paper, and the paper isn't very old, like 6 or 7 years old. But a guy at University of Arizona, which is just 2 hours down the road from me. I'm at ASU, so Arizona State, but these are at University of Arizona, and sometimes people confuse them. They're in Tucson. They said, well, we should get some green lights. They go online and they get like green Halloween party lights. They're at like greenledlight.com or something, just like ordinary, nothing medical about it. And they say, well, that's a little bright. And they block out every third light with electrical tape or something, and they say, we want to send these home with people and we want to see if it will work in a home environment. And sure enough, they're the ones who measured these massive reductions in the frequency and severity of migraine pain. So these papers are showing up. And that's what motivated me to say, let's see. Nobody knows what is wavelength is ideal. Nobody knows what intensity is best. And nobody knows the mechanism by which it works. So I've got these 2 products now, and they really are experimental. They allow people to experiment for themselves. And one of them is sort of this OG, like, look, it looks just like a red light, but it's green. And, you can control different frequencies and you can control different intensities on it. And that's really cool. But AJ, she said, it's not convenient for me to be sitting down and holding the light right up against my face. She asked me if I could do something a little bit different. And so I got with a medical device manufacturer in Utah, and we created what I call the migraine goggles. So inside they look like this. They have a circuit board. They have 8 LEDs, 4 for each eye. You plug it into a control box here. You turn it on, and now, like this, stays on your face by itself. It's meant to be more comfortable than having to hold the box. And it comes with sliders. So you can go all the way off. You can take 4 different wavelengths to whatever your custom intensities, whatever feels best for you, and figure out. because nobody knows how it works. Nobody knows what the optimum is. So now everybody can have sort of their own green light device and play around with the wavelengths and see if one thing works better than another. Logan, it's like this silly little thing is the most advanced green phototherapy device anywhere in the world right now, because nobody is in this space really dedicating themselves to using green phototherapy.
Phenomenal. So I have an uncle, and all my life he has dealt with just debilitating migraines. And I talked to him the other day about what we were going to talk about, discuss the green light, and he said up to 20 migraines a month. And so I think that this is a absolute game changer for people, especially if it works. So before we get into why it works, because I go through some of that, why do you think that we are getting the migraine epidemic that we are? Because to me, it seems like it's getting way more common. Is this kind of the inverse of that? Is it the white lights? Is it the blue lights? Is it dietary, environmental? What do you think is causing these migraines?
I think there's a combination of things. And I have not teased out these variables, but you don't have to listen to Gary Brecka for very long. He says, it's a sodium insufficiency. You got to get your electrolyte, get your salt. And maybe people, ever since the 1970s, when they were saying, salt causes high blood pressure, which is totally bogus, a bullshit myth that was just sort of like propagated in the 1970s. But ever since then, people have been going low sodium or low salt. And I agree with you that the migraines are a more recent phenomena. Getting your electrolytes right is a good thing. And according to Brecka, it has stopped the migraines that people were experiencing. So there's something there with the electrolyte. We can't rule out seed oils because seed oils are incorporated into your body as material. It's not just the calories. Calories are a terrible way to think about food. The seed oils are a material. Your body makes like connective membrane tissue. So these are phospholipids, and they are responsible for surrounding the cell and the transport of nutrients and waste products in and out of the cell, including the mitochondrial organelles inside the cell. If you give your cells the wrong fats, then you get sort of the best your cells can do, but the wrong kind of membranes, and this interrupts your metabolic function. Might be related to that because there's been such a massive increase in seed oil consumption, and it does seem like the migraines are more prevalent. But there's two other things, and I think they're probably more important. Light hygiene is one. It's terrible. Like, we are so disconnected from a naturalistic light environment. We have more screen time than ever. So you're probably familiar with blue light at night, which is interrupting your circadian rhythm, interrupting your melatonin production, messing up your sleep. I think that our light hygiene is so bad now that it might be associated with increased headaches, and especially migraine headaches. There's some things that you can do about it, but some of the light hygiene is kind of invisible. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. You think Phoenix gets so much sunshine. How could anybody in Phoenix be deficient in vitamin D? It would be impossible, right? But it's just the opposite. Most of Phoenix is either deficient or insufficient because it's so damn hot they never go out in the sun during the summer when there's enough UVB to make it. We sit behind our high efficiency, infrared reflective windows, and we get no infrared exposure during the summer when our bodies are expecting it. Well, what about the green? We have no exposure to the forest light in Phoenix because a palm tree isn't going to do it. If I drive an hour and a half, 2 hours, I can get up to Payson, or I can get up to Flagstaff or Sedona, and I can put myself out in the woods, which is a wonderful thing. But I can't always do this. I live downtown in the city. I teach at ASU, where I'm never going to get any sort of shady forest. I am disconnected from the environment that I am ancestrally attuned to. Sometimes you got to correct these sort of technological insufficiencies with technology. If it's the technology, my SUV and my heated leather seats and my reflective glass that is disconnecting me from the environment, then I either got to get out in the environment or I got to bring the technology into my apartment. I'm up on the 32nd floor, Logan. I can't raise chickens, I'm pretty disconnected. So I need to use technologies like Morozko. Here's an ice bath machine. It's the second best thing to nature. I'd rather be swimming in the ocean, but that's not an option for me. So I bring the ocean to me. I would rather be out hiking in the forest, but that's not always an option for me. So instead, I bring the green light of the forest to me. The other thing about that is grounding. I'm 32 stories separated from the earth. And if I'm not careful, I will build up a static charge in my body that in particular affects my blood cells. The static charge on the red blood cells promotes coagulation and it increases viscosity. When the viscosity of your blood goes up, your circulation goes down and you're more prone to clotting. Now, I'm not at a big risk for clotting, but grounding, once I reconnect with the earth, the grounding improves my blood flow, which improves oxygenation of my brain. It improves my cardiovascular markers, reduces pain, and reduces inflammation. So I have 4 hypotheses. Diet and electrolytes are in there. But the 2 hypotheses that I favor, that I'm most interested in, are about the light hygiene and the grounding. Because we are disconnected from our environments, maybe not you so much, maybe not, Michael Coomer, he's got his farm and he's making his turkeys and stuff and he's on Instagram and I love his homesteading channel. It's just not available to me. I'm in the library, I'm in the lab, I'm in the Morozko production studio, I live in the city. Because I'm an engineer, I want to reconnect myself with those essential aspects of nature that otherwise it would be very difficult for me to go. I'd have to take a vacation to go find them.
Yeah. You said something. I just got to throw it out there real quick. The thing that I have seen recommended with a lot of efficacy is like the Magneto mattress. I don't know if you've seen that, especially living elevated, right? Because we've so disconnected from the Schumann resonance and the magnetism piece. And then you hit on a little bit with the grounding on the blood clotting, the coagulation. And I've seen some studies using the lasers to combat clotting using, I want to say it's 532. And so the green light having an effect. And so do you have any thoughts on more of the specific spectrum and what it's doing? And I know we're not even scratching the surface, but there's maybe a handful of people using lasers, right? More specifically than the broad lights to do medical things like Dr. Weber in Germany. There's a group in Australia, but the lasers are helping with clotting. And then it has some sort of a positive on cancer. So you got any thoughts on that?
I've seen similar claims that green light around 532 can be used to treat cancer. But this blood clotting is new to me. So I'm going to, my favorite is scholar.google.com. And I'm going green light blood clotting. We're doing this, in real time just to see what pops up. Selective light triggered release of DNA from gold nanorods switches blood clotting on and off. There's a lot on light and blood clotting, but I think I would have to go pretty deep to find what the green 532 is doing because it's grossly understudied.
It's grossly understudied. And I think that was the importance of having this conversation as more of one of the fundamental conversations on getting that and getting deeper, because I've seen 528 and 532 as kind of the 2 specific wavelengths that have had some more studies involved in at least the world that I'm looking at that lens. So it's also my understanding that complex 3 is the part of the mitochondria that absorb the green light. So Is this whole world something we just literally don't know hardly anything about? The
I
light
gotta believe.
as
Yeah, go ahead. I think there are
I'm just
people in the
fascinated
world who
how
know some
light
things.
can affect us. And like Roland Van Wyck's book, that is absolutely incredible, and how light is sculpting life, basically. And it's just every one of these little pieces. I think that we can't get away from what you talked about with nature. Like, we don't even understand what full spectrum's doing, but I think we get a better idea when we have these conversations, diving into more specifics.
Um, this is a story. This is not like some scientific peer reviewed, but I'm gonna tell a story, and then we're gonna see if this makes sense to you. We've talked a lot about light online, especially the last 4 or 5 years. People talk about blue light. The sky is blue. Blue light during the day, not a big deal, but blue light at night, not good for you. All right, we've got the blue figured out. We talk a lot about infrared. And you can think about, our ancestors, and they're around the campfire, or even just my, grandfather with his wood stove. And we're like, hey, people were probably have thousands of years of experience with infrared that we don't really get anymore. And we should get that infrared. You know what we never talk about, Logan? We never talk about the forest. The forest is green. We talk about the sky, and we talk about the fire, and we talk about the sun and its UV, but we never talk about, did our ancestors spend time in the forest? Did they spend time on the grass? Is it possible, now this is just a story, that we are deficient in green light through our eyes because we live in parking lots? We navigate through our urban environments that have been denuded of the right foliage. There was a survey done like 1992. They go all over the world, and they measure with a spectrophotometer the wavelengths of light in the shady forest. And it's going to be no surprise to you and me that no matter where you are in the world, the shady forests are green. Green dominates like the natural forest environment. The other one that shows up, which is invisible, is near infrared. If you are next to any plant, that a healthy plant, right? And it's got its green chlorophyll thing, and it's rejecting all this green light out into the environment, it is also reflecting infrared. And so the forest is dominated by these two wavelengths, green that's visible and infrared that is invisible. Is it any wonder that the forest is healing? There's this Japanese term that translates into forest bathing. Wounds heal faster. Pain goes down. Anxiety goes down. Cancer heals quicker. Even just a view of plants outside your hospital window shortens your recovery time from surgery or whatever you admit to the hospital for. There are dentists who will put a mural of a forest up. This isn't even a real plant. This is just a mural of plants, and they put it up on the wall. And their patients report feeling less pain because they have the green backdrop of the forest. So this is what I mean by this is a story, Logan. There is something about the way we are wired that responds to green light because our ancestors have been experiencing this ever since, Homo sapiens first started walking around in the proverbial Garden of Eden. Depending upon what your origin beliefs are, we were surrounded by green. No matter what, you might think we live in a simulation. You might think, that we are children of God, like the book of Genesis. And either one, we're green. And nobody online is talking about the deficit of green light through our eyes and through our skin that our modern lives are now subjecting us to. Someday, somebody, I'm an engineer, I make machines, but somebody like Huberman, and he's got his neuroscience doctorate, and maybe he'll do a deep dive into green, and maybe he'll have Rami Burstein or have somebody like smarter than me on this stuff on his podcast, and they will explain to me how these mitochondria are organized around an absorption band or something like that. In the meantime, I'm going to be putting out those machines that people tell me work. And I want to understand the biomolecular mechanisms. And I also admit that I have my own limitations. I went to school for environmental engineering. I'm taking electrical science and thermodynamics and things like that. I think there are people who know more about the way the brain and the optic nerve is working than I know. And they aren't paying attention to this one little aspect of our sort of paleo existence. Jack Kruse talks about light all the time. Jack Kruse says, when you get in the cold, you stimulate the production of UV light inside your body. And I'm like, I don't know what Jack's talking about, but I always assume that Jack is right. And I just don't understand a word he's saying. And it's up to me to figure it out. But Jack hasn't said anything about green light as far as I know yet.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he talks a lot about light, obviously, in full spectrum, but I think Alexis is probably the best one to get that message out there. Alexis Cowan, she's right there on the cusp of making some massive breakthroughs. I think she's the perfect one to carry on what you're talking about.
What is so cool about there's two people, Alexis and Max Gulhane, who's a medical doctor from Australia. And for me, these are like the Jack whisperers.
Yes.
I don't understand what Jack's saying about deuterium. And so I go to Max and I say, what is he talking about? And Max will be like, well, you got to understand that, proton transport is essential to metabolism and the whole electrical function of the body. It's not just about the electrons. It's about the protons too. When you attach another neutron to a proton and you make deuterium, that changes the molecular weight in a drastic way. It doubles it. And that changes the mass transfer of your proton, which totally messes up your electron. And I'm like, Max makes sense. Yep. I'm like, why couldn't Jack explain it that way?
I think that's just not his MO for sure. No, Max and Alexis are two dear friends. I think their work's absolutely incredible. So how are you combining the green with the ice? Is that something, even just anecdotally, like just what's your experience with that?
This has just started. The University of Arizona, they didn't stop with migraine headaches. They said, let's see if this green can do other forms of pain. And so they took fibromyalgia patients. Fibromyalgia is an autoimmune disorder, and it's complex, and that makes it mysterious. Like, we don't really know the origins, although I think there's something going on with dysfunction in the vitamin D system early in life when the immune system is forming, and there's a vitamin D insufficiency that can put you at risk for autoimmune disorders. This is certainly the case with type 1 diabetes, and it looks like it might also be showing up in Parkinson's, in rheumatoid arthritis, in multiple sclerosis, and other disorders of the immune system. Fibromyalgia, I've never had it. I've talked to people who know people, and it's a bitch. But it is not, you're not helpless with fibromyalgia. And so they said, let's take the green light and see if that relieves some of these symptoms. And sure enough, these fibromyalgia patients, they did the green light therapy through their eyes, and they reported less pain and better mobility. Holy crap, Logan. There's something, not just migraines, but there's something generalized about the pain relief, the analgesic effects of green light through the eyes. Harvard, they didn't stop with migraines either. They said, here's what we want to do. We're going to take people who have been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. Now, I don't think much of the DSM-5. I don't think much of psychological or psychiatric diagnoses. Chris Palmer is a psychiatrist, and he studies metabolic approaches. He's like, my mother, she suffered from schizophrenia, and now she's dead. And my whole career is about figuring out what might have helped her when she was still alive. There are women like my mom who go on a ketogenic diet and their schizophrenic symptoms go into remission. This is what Chris is all about. He's not studying light. He's looking at diet and metabolism, but he wrote a scathing critique of his profession. And I think part of that was coming from the experience he had watching his mother deteriorate. He's like, psychiatry is not working. These people have been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder. And we know that the usual talk therapy, the usual medications, limited effectiveness, expensive, and they barely move the needle on making improvements. So Harvard said, all right, we're going to do the usual sort of talk therapy thing. We're going to have a control group and we're going to have a green light group. And the only difference is that the talk therapy sessions will be held in a regular office setting under green light. And so they put some lamps around, and that was it. And they got a statistically significant reduction in general anxiety disorder compared to the control group in the group that was doing the talk therapy in green. Now, there's really no improvement in the control, but the green improved. So now I want to do the study, and I'm like, well, forget about the talk therapy then. Just meditate or something. Just do some breath work or so. We can probably get more. So we know that when you get into the ice bath, you activate the sympathetic nervous system, especially when it's really cold. Like you watch Rogan and he'll make fun of Huberman for not going cold enough or something. He's like, no, Brecka will show up on the Rogan show and Brecka will say, I don't see any evidence of any benefits from going that cold. And Joe will say, I do it because it sucks worse. Joe's in there for the psychology. He wants that sympathetic nervous system activation that scares him. That's your fight or flight response. Green reduces pain and anxiety. Cold ramps up your sympathetic nervous system. So now I've had 3 friends use the green in the ice bath. And they say that initial shock response is less. They say their urge to shiver is less. We don't know if this is good or bad. We don't know really how these two fit together. And, are we losing some of the hormetic effect of the stress? What we know is that the guys who take this lamp and they hold it right up against their face and they get into the ice bath with the green coming through their eyes, they have a more relaxing experience. They postpone that shiver response they just don't feel the urge to shiver at the same rate. And this leads me to believe that the green is strengthening what is sometimes called vagal tone. There's the vagus nerve that maybe controls isn't the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway. The vagus nerve is the parasympathetic conduit. When you have good vagal tone, you've got a strong parasympathetic nervous system. It's associated with rapid recovery from stress, including the stress of a workout. It's associated with heart rate variability, psychological resilience. This is a hypothesis. I think there's something about the green light that improves vagal tone, that strengthens the parasympathetic nervous response and helps balance out that sympathetic nervous system activation that people are getting in the ice bath. So I use green light every morning. The days are getting a little shorter, even in Phoenix. I wake up really early, and instead of turning on, my normal lights, I turn on my Migraine lantern. And I got my computer in dark mode, but I'm still checking my emails and things like that, or I'm doing reading, but I'm doing it with the green light because for me, it's a more gentle start to the day. Then the sun comes up, I'm hopping in the ice bath. And these are good things, just based on my experience, for all my worries. And I got a ton of worries, Logan. I'm a bundle full of anxieties. But I got my magnesium threonate that I take. I got my ice bath. I got my green light. I sleep great. And then I get up in the morning and I do it all over again. What's the new thing that I got to take on now?
I love it. The ice bath, I want to circle back to that because like you were definitely one of the top in that world. My 10 and 9-year-olds have started doing it too with me, and I can't explain. It's probably the worst commercial ever. How bad it sucks, right? Like the process of just getting in and doing it, it's miserable. So I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that. But what I have found, especially with the kids, is after we do the ice bath, they feel amazing. And they will go jump on a bike and they'll go do pull-ups and they'll say, Dad, watch these push-ups. And they just have this explosion of energy. So what does that mean for us adults? Like, I feel great afterwards. I have never regretted doing one after the fact. And so what is that? What does that mean for us as adults that is happening visually with these kids?
There was a study in Poland that Huberman loves to cite. And so because Huberman has popularized it, it's like gone all over the internet. The 250%, dopamine boost that you get, 250% is like 3.5 times the dopamine, and it lasts for hours. You get sometimes it's called adrenaline, noradrenaline, sometimes it's called epinephrine or norepinephrine. You get this huge boost in these neurotransmitters that make you feel great. So that's one. It's impossible to be in a bad mood. Like you can be in a bad mood when you're about to get into the ice bath, but you can't be in a bad mood when you come out, because you have all of these neurotransmitters that change the chemistry of your brain. And you're like, wow, I feel great. But there's a big difference between your kids and you, at least typically. Your kids, 9, 10, they got a lot of brown fat. Human babies are born with like copious quantities of brown fat because they can't shiver. Their muscles are not fully developed. And so to protect a human baby from the cold, it will, with all of its brown fat, do what's called non-shivering thermogenesis. Burn the white fat that it's born with in the brown fat that it's born with to generate enough heat to keep it warm. Your kids have brown fat. And brown fat is a higher proportion of their body than in you, because human beings gradually lose brown fat as they get older, unless they stay cold, unless they get enough cold exposure to periodically activate their brown fat. Like anything else in your body, if you don't use it, you lose it. So there was a time in the US when medical doctors thought there was no such thing as brown fat in adult human beings. They're like, oh no, that's just baby fat and it goes away. It's not true. In 2007, there was a Swedish team of researchers that were noticing on these cancer scans. These are called PET scans, which is the same technology that Susanna Soberg did her dissertation on. She's looking for brown fat with these PET scans. But this is, 15 years, maybe 10 years before Susanna Soberg. These Swedish researchers are looking at these cancer scans and saying, there's something on the scans that's not cancer. We think it's brown fat. And like the whole medical world said, you're nuts. There's, adults don't have brown fat. Or those juvenile scans? No way. And somebody at the Sloan Kettering Cancer Institute in New York said, I've got 10,000 of these PET scans. You inject the body with a radioisotope, with a tracer of glucose. And then you do the scan to see where the glucose goes, because tumor cells preferentially metabolize glucose. So the glucose gets taken up in the tumor cell and you're like, I see that glucose on the scan. That's a tumor. And the Sloan Kettering guy's like, I ought to be able to figure this out. Brown fat, my ass. And he goes to all these scans. 5% of them showed brown fat. That meant 95% had no detectable brown fat. And they were just kind of ignoring the other 5%. Oh, maybe that's a bad scan. But when they went back and looked at it, they said, holy crap, 5% of the adults coming through our cancer clinic have this brown fat, and the brown fat is clearing the glucose out of the bloodstream. That's why it's showing up on the scan. It kind of makes sense. These machines, they use a lot of electricity. They get hot. You got to keep the room a little cool to keep the machine right. You put on one of these, hospital gowns that make you feel like an idiot. I'd rather just walk around naked in the hospital than wear one of those napkins, but you got no clothing on. You get in, and some people, their brown fat gets activated. And now you can do a whole dissertation just on brown fat, Logan. Your kids have it. And I don't know what it was like for you when you were a kid, but when I was a child, I was growing up in Pittsburgh. It was the 1970s. We had some really hard winters. And I can remember my mom, put on a hat, and it's me and my sisters. I'm not cold. I'm fine, Mom. Kids know when they get cold. They'll come in and they'll say, oh, Mom, can you make me some hot cocoa or something? Your kids don't feel it the way that you feel it. And sometimes we forget what it was like, when we were kids. Very first day you go to the beach. Now, for me, school would be over and my parents, we'd start our summer vacation. We would drive up to Massachusetts. And of course, the first thing we wanted to do is jump in the water. My parents wanted nothing of it. What did we care? Because we're kids. We're like, this is the beach. There's some good videos like that are now circulating about kids who just want to be in the water. And even if their teeth are chattering, you can't pull them out of there. They feel it a little bit different. So there's the brain chemistry, and then there's the metabolism. Your kids have the metabolism to keep them going in the cold long before you're like, that's it, I'm giving up. Your kids are like, oh no, come on, Dad, watch me.
I love it. It's been a absolute wonderful addition just to life. And so thank you for, pounding that drum and doing all the work that you've done on creating the awareness and the actual products we can utilize. So would it be safe to say that after this conversation that the key to health or optimization is get back to nature, and if we can't, we gotta maximize some of these technologies? I'm going to
rephrase this because you know how I feel. You're kind of asking me this easy question like, yes, of course, that's it, right? But I'm going to rephrase the obvious answer. Let's do it this way. What do you have to lose going back to nature? Let's say nature is not the key. Let's say cancer is actually caused by a deficiency of chemotherapy drugs. And I'm making this up. Like Zach Bush, he's online and he's really good at this because he's an oncologist. He used to treat cancer. And he said he had sort of this professional crisis when he realized cancer is not caused by a deficit of chemotherapy. Like it just doesn't, in his mind, he's like, there's some underlying thing that the body needs that it's not getting. And it sure as heck ain't chemo drugs. And that doesn't mean that chemo can't work some of the time. It can. But the rates of cure, so to speak, that have resulted like from the last 50 years of cancer research have barely budged. My older sister, she had the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which was the same thing that Mario Lemieux had. It's why he retired the first time from the Penguins. And you can treat that with chemo. Lemieux's doing fine. My sister's healthy. So there are few cases where chemo works. And for the most part, it doesn't do you any good. What do you have to lose by going into the stream and getting you grounded, going up into the forest, doing your forest bathing, like taking care of your light hygiene, getting some sun during the day, getting that infrared, shutting down the blue at night? What do you have to lose by putting grounding sheets on your mattress and keeping yourself electrically connected to the ground? And you might say, well, here's the real risk, Tom. My family will make fun of me. My sister will call me an idiot and say, that's all witch doctor nonsense. So how does it feel? Does it feel okay to get in the stream? Does it feel okay to go for a walk in the forest? Because for me, it feels great. And then Dean Hall will write to me and he said, I had terminal cancer. It's a slow leukemia. He knew it was going to kill him eventually, but it hadn't got him yet. He said, I wanted to do something to inspire other cancer patients. So I went to my doctor and I said, I'm a swimmer. I've always been an athlete. And my doctor said, you so much as set a foot into a public pool with your immune system in this state and it could kill you. And Dean said, so I guess maybe I got nothing left to lose because he's dying anyway. He swam the entire length of the Willamette River in his home state of Oregon. And that thing is 188 miles long and it's cold. He went in and out of hypothermia. Like he wrote a book called The Wild Cure about his experiences. When he came out of the Willamette River, Logan, he didn't have leukemia anymore. He reported to his oncologist in San Diego. They draw blood and they say, if I hadn't done your initial diagnosis myself, I would say you must have been misdiagnosed because there's now no trace of leukemia in your blood markers. Dean is doing great, but he still had a lymphoma after all that swimming. So he said, I'm not doing chemo. And his doctor was like, Dean, you're going to die. And I'm angry at you for not, following my medical directions. He goes, give me 3 months, doc. I'm going up into the mountains. I'm going to get into the woods. I'm going to do the forest bathing. And if I'm not better, maybe I'll do it your way. Lymphoma gone. what I want to say, Logan, is the FDA will not allow me to say, getting back in touch with ground, getting in touch with nature, getting in touch with our ancestral sort of roots is the cure. I'm not allowed to say that. So instead, I'm going to say, what do you have to lose? Does it suck to go for a walk in the woods so bad that you're not willing to try it? And you could say that ice bath sucks. I mean, this is why my competitors sell a lot more ice baths than I do, because my competitors will be like, it's only 50 degrees, it's fine, do it. And you're right. The first 15 seconds of the ice bath are almost as bad as the 15 minutes before the ice bath when you're just staring down at the ice going, I don't want to do this, That part, it can hurt. And then you get out and you feel great. So what do you have to lose? Just give it a shot.
I love it. I love it, brother. I love it. Well, give us all the where we go to find more about your work, and specifically, I love that you're spending, well, I guess the good and bad, more in time, in studio time. So where do we go to learn more?
You know where to find out about the ice baths. It's morozcoforge.com. And if you are Googling around for like ice bath testosterone or ice bath multiple sclerosis or ice bath diabetes, Google is going to feed you some NIH journal articles, some really prestigious, whether it's Healthline or Mayo Clinic, and they're going to feed you Morozco because we are the definitive source on ice bath science because of all this freaking reading and writing that I've done. So Morozco is kind of easy to find. But people tell me they look for migraine and they can't find it because Google doesn't give a crap about migrainelamp.com. You can search for it. You eventually get there. But the best thing to do is migreenlamp.com. Just put it into your browser. It's going to take you to my website. I only have like 3 articles up there, but there's a bunch of testimonies. People, all ages, different sexes. The only thing that so far the green light can't touch is what I call a high estrogen headache. And it really sucks because a lot of women, maybe late 30s, early 40s, it's not a migraine, but they get a headache at a certain point in their cycle. They know something is wrong and they would love to just, spend 10 minutes with a green light and then the headache goes away. That's great if it's a high altitude headache or if it's a migraine headache, but I can't seem to touch that high estrogen headache that happens for some women before they go into perimenopause, but their hormones are still changing.
Interesting. Well, we're going to keep plugging out some information that adds to the SEO and keep going because I think it's a big deal. I have seen enough evidence that I'm a believer between the natural and then what that green light's probably looks like it's doing.
The only other podcast that I've done where we actually talked about green light was I went on the Mark Bell podcast. And I don't know if you know Mark Bell, but he's most famous for like injecting enough steroids that they wouldn't even use to kill a racehorse. Mark Bell's like, I'm going to take them. Let's see what happens. So he's wicked smart and he's got this great sense of humor and he's out on this experimental edge of bodybuilding. And he's been having a bunch of people come through. Hugh Ruman's been on the podcast, Mike Mutzel, Chris Palmer, me, right? And I think, what great company. I want to go on the Mark Bell podcast. We're in the middle of talking about testosterone and ice baths. Mark Bell's podcast producer, Andrew Z, he has suffered from migraine headaches since he was like 9 years old. And he's like, hey, wait a second. Enough about all this testosterone. I want to talk about migraines for a second, And so we go through our thing. And of course, I sent him a light after the podcast. He texts me and he's like, this is some kind of a miracle. Like my wife is using it. Awesome. I'm using it. Drugs don't work. I've been to the hospital for my migraines. Like, Logan, we got to get your uncle a green light to try because this is $1 billion a day problem in the United States. There are some people like he's one of the worst sufferers. They will have like 3 or 4 of these a week, and anything that will take the edge off their pain, allow them to function, play with his nephews or whatever it is. Like it feels like a lifesaver in that moment. And that's what Andrew Z was writing to me.
That's wonderful. Yeah, no, it's got to be part of the solution, if not a major issue. I think that's why, early on when I asked you what you thought the cause might be, I really think it's both sides. It's where that light hygiene, it's the negatives are as big of a deal as the positives with the full spectrum sunlight. And so,
Agreed.
thank you, my friend. Thank you for your time again, all the great work. We're going to keep plugging along at this and definitely be following up with a lot more to come, because this is just scratching the surface.
This has been a pleasure. Yeah, it's wonderful to talk with you again.
Thank you for joining us in the Sowing Prosperity mission. If you like this content, like and subscribe, share with your friends. Be sure to check out sowingprosperity.com. Sign up for the email. We've got so much more work to do.